Hey, what's up, everyone? It's the Lemesis, your nemesis, but you can call me Lem. And I'm doing a Helldivers 2 video. I've been playing this game since the beginning of the launch of this video game, and I felt like making a video. And this game is, or at least this video is titled A Game for No One. So I want to start off with basically the reason why I'm releasing this video is because there's an update that just recently came out that had some nerfs, had some buffs, and I already feel and sense that Arrowhead, in my personal opinion, is heading in the wrong direction. Now, before we even begin, I already know I'm going to get a lot of hate because that's just typically what people do. The difference is I'm one of those people that's built for it. So mentally, I'm not fragile like most of the people that are online. So I welcome it, and I don't really mind it at all. Um, just don't be racist. But other than that, I don't have any problems with that. And to be honest with you, I don't have too many huge problems with the nerfs that occurred. What I have a problem with is the philosophy that I believe Arrowhead is trying to take with this game, not understanding the gaming community and what we've been looking for, what we've been, gun shy about. And I want to start off by just saying, what does a nerf really mean? This is where I think Arrowhead and many other gaming studios get it wrong every single time. Is that if you could just picture a world where we didn't have nerfs, we didn't have any nerfs in a video game, and then that very first nerf occurred. What did that nerf really communicate to your players? Is that nothing is sure, nothing is forever. Your hard work, the grind you put into the game can be completely wiped away with just one fell swoop, one stroke of the pen, one change on the keyboard. And I think that's really the outrage that you're getting from players who are frustrated when you go on Reddit, you go online, you go on YouTube, is that that's what they're doing with the nerfs. They're taking all of your work, all of your excitement and effort that you put into the game, this sense of accomplishment, and they're wiping it all away. And they're forcing you to start from ground zero. Now, typically, when you have games that do something like that or have a mechanic like that, that's where you find games like Diablo, where when they release a new season, you start from zero with a new mechanic or a series of new mechanics, and then you play the game all over again. But when you're playing a game like Helldivers 2, you have a progression that you're constantly working towards as you level up and you unlock more guns and you increase the upgrades and the power of your guns for you to then therefore get back online and play said game to have whatever gun that you spent a hard time working towards to be completely nerfed. That's part of the major problem. So I think that's the first question we need to address. What does it really mean when you nerf? And that's really the spirit behind why you're seeing so much outrage of the changes that have been made. And I agree with that sentiment. I've seen many other games go down this route, games that started off really well, and then they started making some of these changes because they felt like it was for the balance of the game. And I find it funny because we seem to have learned from our history that when this happens, people typically stop playing those games and then they move on. This is why we have so much vitriol towards the gaming industry as a whole, where we feel like, live service games are so terrible, we can't stand them, because they do things like this in addition to many other things. They give us incomplete games that are not completed, and Helldivers 2 started off really well. And it feels like if they keep up with this philosophy, they really won't be any different than any of the other games that have come out in the past. They may have set the new foundation for what other games might want to do, leaving the path for other gaming companies and industries in this industry to make better decisions in the long run. So that was the first thing that I wanted to start it with. The next thing I wanted to go into is that Arrowhead Game Studios is the equivalent to Super Earth. And this game makes me want to believe in the theme and the, fight for democracy that it sets out for me to get hyped up to play this game. Because if you really think about it, if you look at all the parts of this game, there's really not much there. There really isn't a story. It's just this D&D master who's trying to get all of us to believe in this government system, to fight for democracy, to fight to the death. And when you look at Super Earth and the head of Super Earth, which is Arrowhead Game Studios, if you know, there's some realism to this. What military or army sets up their soldiers to have less than weapons to fight the most vile enemies you've ever faced in the entire cosmos? I mean, we don't do that to our men and women who fight in our current military. You might find this to be a stretch. I, on the other hand, do not, because that's part of the game. Being a part of this community, being a part of this game that Arrowhead wants me to believe in, they're telling me that I need to fight for Super Earth. Now, I'm not physically fighting for Super Earth, but I'm taking the time that I have in my day to fight in this game. And you're telling me that, again, let's go back to that question. What does a nerf really mean? You're telling me that all the progression that I could make in a game, or all the excitement that I can have with a particular gun, or a particular, or an upgrade or an unlock, can be completely taken from me, and my entire experience is ruined. I can go online and I can play this game that I once loved, but have a very less than overwhelming experience the next time I play that game. Again, it's what you communicate with your nerfs, not necessarily the nerf, right? Everyone wants to get so frustrated about, well, hold on, they only nerfed the unsafe part of the railgun, or they only added an extra 5 to 10 seconds to the bubble shield. But again, they're communicating what fans don't like, especially in a PvE style game, is that everything could change. And really, like I've seen in other videos around the internet, people are going to try to find the most efficient ways to play the game because they don't have that much time. I think that's what people are missing, is that we play games and not all of us have all the live long day. So when you create this environment, which is the next point I want to get into, is that Arrowhead has basically created PvP. And what they've done is they've been very divisive with their changes. It's funny. You don't want to add a PvP into the game, but you do want to divide the community by taking away from some fans and not giving enough to those fans that you've taken away from. And then guess what happens? For some reason, there's this weird culture of dogging on other people for the play style that they have. They want to dismiss you and ridicule you because you may not be as good as they are in the game. That's ridiculous. That I don't even understand that reasoning. One, you don't even know if you're better. And then two, it's about a preference. So you're just hating on me for my preferences. Sounds very similar to a lot of the hate that happened in our history, and at least in America and all over the world. It just doesn't make sense. And to me, Arrowhead, you have complete control over this. You've decided to make these decisions. You've decided to put this patch down, and you knew this is what it was going to do, and you did it anyway. And that's why I go back to the title of this video. A game for everyone is a game for no one? Really? A game for no one? I think all you're doing is, and I want to point this out. I'm about this. A game for everyone is a game for no one, because I want to point out something just to show you the type of background that I have. There was a game that came out not too long ago called Sifu. It was a very difficult game. And guess what? I was one of the first people to play that game and achieve great heights in playing that game. Within the first 2 weeks, I was able to 95% complete that game and go through the difficulty spikes that you had as you went from level to level, dying over and over and over and over again. So my point is that when you approach a game the way Sifu did, which I think it was by Slow Clap, they had the difficulty spike from the very beginning. They released the game difficult. People were struggling. So people had the ability to make the decision on whether they wanted to be a part of this game or not. They were like, man, this game's not for the faint of heart. Do you want to play it? You can check the videos and the reviews. It's quite difficult. So if you're going to get in knowing what you're facing. Well, that's not the approach that you guys have taken here, Arrowhead. You actually had the multiple difficulties. You made it really fun, but now you're in the process of nerfing elements of the game that ruins the experience that a player once had by making it more difficult after the fact. And again, it's the spirit of what a nerf really means. You keep changing the game, making it worse for some players after they've approached the game that they purchased. So again, it's the idea of I give you my money, not a lot, and the experience we got was great, but then you keep changing my experience after I've given you my money. Instead of what Sifu did. Sifu made the game difficult. Your experience was annoying as hell from the jump. So if you didn't like the game, you bounced or you got your refund back. I kept playing the game because I saw what the game was trying to do from the very beginning. All the changes they made to that game after the fact weren't nerfs that made the game more difficult. They gave us the ability to increase the difficulty that we could choose to do, but they didn't take anything away. They didn't say, we're going to change the combo so that you can't do the combo the way you used to do it. No. They made the game more fun for others to play on a mass. They actually added in easier difficulties. They added in more ways for you to play that game. Now, by the time most of those changes were made, I was done with the game because I 100%ed the game. Then there was a ton of changes that happened after the fact. But that's my point. Most, if not all of those changes that happened after the fact just made it more accessible for people to play the game. So when you go back to my original question, which is what does a nerf really mean? That's what you're communicating to your players, that we might give you something right now, realize the error of our ways because we don't like it because you're having too much fun, and then we take it away. That completely takes the air out of my sail. I don't want to play a game like that because I'm going to be investing my time in a game. You should be adding more to it to make the game more enjoyable, not taking things away from it to make my experience more difficult. Because you're not giving me what I paid for from the very beginning. You've set the standard of what the game should be like from the very beginning, and now you're tweaking the standard. You're not giving me the option for just more difficulty, which would make more sense, which is what other game companies have done. You're taking the same difficulty and you're making my experience less. Now, it starts off with the railgun and it starts off with the bubble shield. It starts off with the breaker. So, in theory, when people are thinking about this game and they're looking at the individual components of it, you're like, bro, only 3 things were nerfed. That's where it starts. If they keep this philosophy up, this is the beginning of the end for this company because this game within in and of itself doesn't really have much, in my opinion. So, like I wrote in my notes, the mistake they made is progression doesn't matter anymore because they're just going to nerf everything. And they say they say that and we'll get into the article as well. But they say, like, as a developer, it's not a good idea to buff everything and nerf nothing. But what they don't understand is what fun is. You can't purposely limit us in every single direction that we look. And that's exactly what they've done. The game already had its limitations. That's something that you got from the jump with this game. You had cooldowns in your stratagems. You had to call down extra weapons. And then you had limitations on even your resupplies. If for you to get resupplied up to get more ammo, you would find ammo around in the field if you could, if they had that. And or you would have to call in for a resupply, and even that had a cooldown. So there were already so many limitations that we were okay with accepting from the jump. But then again, giving us this idea that a nerf could come at any point in time and change our experience, man, that's when we're finding ourselves in a situation where you've lost the trust of the player base. And there will be people who leave this game because of this. And you'll lose more players as you continue down this path. And then you'll start to question, a game for everyone is a game for no one? Because if we get to the point where no one is playing our game, because we keep making changes down the road that make the game more difficult, and what you promised us isn't what you've given us. And what I mean by promise is what I've paid for is not what you've given me, then we have a problem. So that's what I'm not liking at all. Another thing we're going to get into is, and we saw in articles, Helldivers 1 is more over the top than Helldivers 2. So let's actually just get to that. And I love this Reddit post, and he says people talking about nerfs and buffs who never played Helldivers 1 don't understand how underpowered most things are at the moment. And I think this is in direct reply to the article that was put out here, but I really do agree with this. He says, I see a lot of people talking about power creep and how Helldivers isn't supposed to be having fun smashing bugs. I get it should be challenging, and it already is, especially if you're not running a meta build. It's basically a huge handicap, if not outright impossible on later levels. But the first Helldivers wasn't balanced anything like this. You had challenging encounters while also having a wide variety of weapons that could kill in 1 to 2 hits and didn't stop the game from being challenging. That is a huge point that I think people need to understand is when people play video games, this is the part what I meant earlier about just wanting to have fun. There's all these people that are out there that think by making the game more difficult, that's what makes it fun. I had a lot of fun on Sifu. The game was difficult from the very beginning, so I knew what I was getting into. That was fun. Buying a game that wasn't that difficult, but then you making the changes to make it more difficult doesn't make it fun because you keep changing my expectations. That's not what I wanted to play. That's not what I purchased. What I purchased was a game that was difficult, but I had enough resources and I had enough explosives and cool gadgety weapons that make that experience more fun. That's what Helldivers is selling. It's giving you the Starship Troopers, over the top, bombs, explosions. You'll accidentally kill your friends. You'll overcharge a gun and it'll blow you up. That's what it's getting. So to me, the reason why it should be never any nerfs and nothing but buffs is because you sold the game this way. If you sold the game like Sifu did, and then you notice not a lot of people are playing, which is basically what happened, and then you started to make changes and tweaks to add to the game to bring more people in, that makes more logical sense to me. No one really can complain that way. But if you take away from people who've already purchased the game, making the game more difficult, that's where you messed up. The guy goes on to say, it isn't fun kiting mobs for 5 minutes because you have absolutely nothing to kill them. And it isn't fun as if you take stratagems which are utterly useless against heavy armored mobs. I'd recommend people play the first Helldivers to get a sense of how it was balanced and see how underwhelming the patch is in terms of, I don't know what that means, because it's really not at the place it used to be, and it's really making it less fun to play. I find myself playing less because I get tired of dying to chargers, hunters, etc., and required only one type of build to play against. Starship Troopers, the game, also went through many nerfs, and it killed the game. I honestly wholeheartedly agree. I think that's exactly what's happening. I saw different games that did similar things. Games like Marvel Snap, they made a lot of changes. They nerfed it, and guess what? The game never got to its high. It's literally playing the same 100,000 people keep playing this game, and it's just not fun anymore. And I think what's going to happen is if they keep this up, the same thing's going to happen here. I just don't think it will keep that number base. I think what will happen is it's just going to drop lower and lower and lower and lower. And it's just not fun when you play a game that way. And I want to point out the next thing he referenced here is I see a lot of people talking about power creep. I mean, I want to go over the definition of power creep and just talk about this reasoning here. So power creep refers to the gradual unbalancing of a trade card game or video game or role-playing game due to the release of new content, leaving older content underpowered. Well, if your issue is power creep, then what do you think they could do to stop power creep from old content? First off, the game is designed for us to play against these enemies on different planets. Eventually, what are we going to do? We're going to overtake the planet, free it of any enemies, and then we will no longer be able to fight on that planet. So there's already old content that will become outdated just because we'll have victory on that planet. But even if somehow we could still play on that planet and have those old encounters, all they would have to do to avoid power creep is just increase the difficulty of the enemies that are on there, or just add in a higher difficulty that makes it more difficult. That's all they would have to do. if they would never really have to touch any of the weapons or anything that's in the game as is, they could just add to it. They could add enemies in the game. They can have a mutation of enemies that make them stronger. If you have an issue with some of the weapons that are in the game, you could have a set of newer enemies that require newer weapons, and you can have a set of older weapons that you could use as well, strictly for the older enemies. So it's not like this reasoning that people keep coming up with as if there's an end-all be-all. I mean, guys, we're human beings. We have solutions for many things. We just got to put our heads together and just think about these things. You can't just use this argument of, it's going to cause power creep and then not really talk about what power creep is and solutions behind power creep. So yeah, I don't want those issues either. And I see those people on Reddit saying those things, but logical common sense tells you there are solutions to power creep as well. And it's not just nerfing everything that's in the game. Again, go back to what I said. What does a nerf really mean? You're taking away something that I've already paid for. That's really the spirit behind why people are so frustrated. And then I saw this other post on Reddit. It was, what are we supposed to do with 5 Bile Titans and 7 Chargers spawning all at once in a tiny eradicate mission? How is this balanced in any way? It's not. It's not balanced. And this is where I feel like the money-hungry aspect of this gaming company comes into play. Is they don't want to give too much to you. They want you to spend more time playing your game or playing their game. So they do want you to be sweaty hands. They do want you grinding. They do want you being in their game for longer for you to spend more money for them to make money. They don't want the game to be easy for you to play and then you beat everything, because that's typically what happens, right? When you get people who play a game like this, how many people or you saw online just are at level 50, level 40 something, level 30 something? People go through these games so rapidly and so quickly that the developers don't have enough time to even come out with the new content to keep people engaged in the game. To be honest with you, I did the same thing with Sifu. Sifu was so basic in its design. It had 5 different levels, and the difficulty ramped up quick, and you just had to beat the game as is. And honestly, I beat that game in 2 weeks. Maybe 2.5 weeks. And I had a little bit more time than I would think than the average gamer. So I would think that people kind of go through the game very quickly, even if it's in a month. So you play a game for a month and it's done. This is supposed to be a live service game, right? You want this game to go on and on and on. So then you don't want to, the fact that I think what's going to happen is they won't have enough new content released, because when you just drop vehicles and you drop a tank or you drop a wall, it's just a new stratagem for people to choose and then to do the same things in a different way on the same exact planets. That's not going to change anything. Now, you can change the environment, but then eventually people get used to the cool. Once you see a fiery tornado a couple times, and once you see meteors fall from the sky, and once you've died the umpteenth time from a meteor randomly hitting you on the head, you kind of lose track of the game. So another issue with this game is that the game does not offer much. It doesn't offer much at all. When you get to level 20 to 25, that's basically the climax. And when you get past 25 to 50, it's irrelevant. So it just doesn't really make any sense to keep going beyond level 50, because I'm already feeling that kind of pull of what's the point of keep playing? I mean, I was excited to play before today. I hopped on and played for an hour or two, and my experience was much less enjoyable. And I saw many games that I hopped onto without talking to anybody, just kind of pointing out things in the map, trying to direct people to go to certain places, and people just quit. They kept dying so often, and I play on the higher difficulties. Again, I'm not one of those players that, man, I want to play on easy or I want to play on challenging. No, I play on the higher difficulties. And this is what happens. This is the experience. So I'm saying to you, they're just going to keep losing players if they keep this up, which they may not care about, right? Because they said it before. This game a game for everyone is a game for no one. And even though I agree with that sentiment, it could be to their demise. So let's just go into the article, break this down little by little, and then we can just end this video so it's not a huge, long, drawn-out video, even though we're at 24 minutes. But they say here, you know, we recently released a patch containing our first round of balance changes to Helldivers 2, and our head of product testing has some valuable insight into our philosophies and practices when it comes to balancing. So she says, Catherine Baskin, she says, hello, everyone. My name is, well, actually, no, I guess that's not Catherine. It was written by, but it was Patrick Lasota. I was the designer on the first Helldivers, and I'm currently head of product testing at Arrowhead. A bit of a grandiose title, but what it means in this context is that I'm responsible for how Arrowhead listens to feedback and balances its games. I'd like to talk about the changes we made in this patch and why. So, first, I'd like to speak to the general power of primary weapons. Many have commented that they aren't powerful enough and are unable to deal with all the enemies either by the amount of ammunition required or their raw DPS. This is very much intentional. I think it's a huge mistake. So you have a crap ton of guns for people to unlock. What do you think is going to happen as people continually play this game and they see things drop? There's no excitement for me to go grind to get 70 medals or 60 medals or 50 medals to unlock a new particular weapon if you just told me that my primary weapons are meant to not have enough DPS. You've intended it to be that way. So now you've told me every new gun you release that's going to be a primary weapon is useless. So why should I even waste time with the medals in the shop? So you just added a bunch of things to the shop to give me this sense of progression, and you just told me my progression is useless. Thank you. So people who have not reached level 50 will immediately read this and go, well, why am I unlocking these medals then? Why am I getting these medals? Why am I getting requisitions? Why am I doing any of these things if you're telling me that? Then you say you need to rely on stratagems and the stratagems of your team to deal with all the enemies effectively, either by eagle strikes, orbitals, support weapons, or turrets. Some of your loadout team should be tailoring their loadout to killing the weaker stuff more efficiently. Look at this problem. They're telling you how to play the game. Now, I know they designed the game, and that's cool. They should have say in that. But now they're telling you how to play the game, which, again, this is the problem I find with a lot of gaming industries. It's like, I do think that a lot of these people who end up working in these gaming companies used to be previous gamers, but then they try to interject their own philosophical ideologies into the way they design the game, not realizing that, like they said, a game for everyone is a game for no one. But they make up a very small portion of the typical gamer, and I think that's the problem. It's like we need some of these over-the-top gamers to actually go out there and start a studio and get some games going, because we're starving for this. First off, Eagle Strikes, Orbitals, and support weapons have the most ridiculous cooldowns ever. They spawn enemies at such a random clip, at such a high clip, that by the time you use one of your stratagems, you have to wait for a cooldown, and they've already spawned in, like automatons, they've spawned in a couple ships of more enemies that your orbitals and your eagle strikes have already destroyed. So what are you doing? You're spending time running around. You've already run out of ammo. And then it's like, well, we want to give you this game where you're just balanced in your approach and how you use your ammo. But no, you've added too many limitations. It's not like when I destroy a group of enemies, they don't spawn in anymore. The coast is clear and we can move on. And then we have to wait a few more minutes in between the next encounter. No, the current encounter will bring in new enemies, and you haven't even done the objective at that particular location. So he says, this doesn't mean that your primary weapon shouldn't feel good to use, but please understand that it is primary only in the sense that it's something you always spawn with. This is a theme that I see throughout this whole article. It's like they want to state what you're feeling, and there's no conclusion to it. So this doesn't mean your primary weapon shouldn't feel good to use, but it doesn't. But please understand that it's primary only in the sense that it's something you always spawn with. So my point means, this doesn't mean your primary weapon shouldn't feel good to use, means it doesn't feel good to use. So there is no but please understand. It's just, hey, your primary is meant to not it's not meant to feel good, and deal with it. Then you get to this part. I have since the game release seen many who say don't nerf, only buff, and other similar ideas. However, as a designer, I can tell you this is not a great idea. Why? Why is it not a great idea? I love how the developers, and hopefully he's going to shut me up in a second on why that's the case. I don't think he will. Why is it not a good idea? Why can't you do the hard work to actually make a game that's balanced without nerfing the things you've originally released in the game? This seems like such head in the sand. There are so many perspectives that you're going to have as a game developer to make sure you're trying to keep people to play your game by drawing it out. And by keeping the people to play your game by nerfing is going to cause people to walk away from the game. And you hope that this nerf isn't enough so that people walk away from the game. But the moment people leave and they don't play the game, you'll be bringing it back. We've seen studios do it. Just recently, Diablo did the exact same thing. So, however, as a designer, I can tell you this is not a great idea, but I understand where the sentiment comes from. Again, I'm going to do whatever I want. Deal with it. All too often in game industries, the core fantasy and what makes a weapon feel good and fun is ignored for the sake of balance. So this is him trying to explain. I believe players are scared of nerfs. No, we're not. Because it will ruin the fantasy of a weapon, ruin their fun. We aren't scared of nerfs. We paid for something, and you're taking away what we paid for. If the game came out this way, we wouldn't need a nerf, and therefore, if the game was released properly, we would understand the contract that we're getting into. You're just taking away something that probably shouldn't have been in the game, but that's too bad. It's your fault. You put it in the game from the jump. It's about that original question. What does a nerf really mean? I paid for something, you took it away. This is not how this transaction goes. I paid $40 for this experience. Give me this experience. Right? Now you could say, well, you paid $40 for a game that was broken. Should it stay broken? No. Because you didn't meant to release it broken. But when it comes to the guns itself, you released it that way. You play tested it that way. Now you're seeing people exploit what you play tested, and now you want to pull back? That's not how it works. Let's go on. I believe players are scared of nerfs because it will ruin the fantasy of a weapon and ruin their fun. And that's exactly what it does, but we're not scared of it. It is extra important to use for us to tread carefully so that we don't ruin fantasy and fun when we do nerfs. Well, I don't see how you're being careful in that. That's exactly what you're doing. You're creating the culture that we're already gun shy about, that we don't want to deal with. We hope you, our players, will tell us when we cross that line inadvertently. I don't think you really care about what we tell you, because you're telling us through this explanation, I don't really give a rip about what you have to say. This is what we're going to do. And then he says, take a closer look at the changes we made for this balance patch. The Breaker was quickly pinned down as the meta weapon, vastly overperforming other weapons and being the best choice for all Helldivers, at least if YouTube is to be believed. So again, it's like a fan of video games who has a particular philosophy, but that doesn't represent the masses. He wants to take a dig at other YouTubers and the things that they have to say. So you've created PvP. You've done it. You're just for you to put this in your article, at least if YouTube is to be believed, you're just as toxic. How would you put this in? How could you sit there and say we don't want PvP because we don't want to create toxicity? And in one of your first explanations for one of your guns, you take a little zing at YouTubers for no reason. And I'm not even mad because I've never made a game on Helldivers ever before. This is my, I'm sorry, not made a game. I never made a video on Helldivers ever. This is my first video. And look at you. You toxic son of a you-know-what. Like, you're ridiculous. But we'll continue on. Helldivers veterans will remember the Breaker from the first game and how important it was, something we have made an effort to mimic in this game as well. When we looked at the Breaker and the data we have on its usage, painted a picture of a well-liked weapon that was great at killing chaff and generally had a few more kills more than other weapons. It was, however, not necessarily better at making you succeed in a mission, and no real damage nerfs were warranted. The calculated total damage per magazine was quite high compared to other weapons, however. and something that could be reined in while reinforcing the intended fantasy. You're not reinforcing the intended fantasy. You nerfed it because too many people were taking advantage of making the game easier for them by going off the rip with the breaker, shooting constantly, and you wanted to make it more difficult. You want people to die more, have a less fun experience, and keep playing your game longer. That's what you want. You didn't want us to quickly beat the game, quickly take over a planet, quickly figure out strategies. You're purposely trying to slow us down. Don't lie to me. Don't lie. Because that's exactly what they're doing. I'm not one of those players, but I know that's what they're doing. They're trying to slow us down so we don't beat the game as fast, so that we don't come out with, they can't come out with content fast enough to keep you interested. That's the truth. Hey, my name is blah, blah, blah from Arrowhead. I want you to slow down in your progression. We're dialing down these guns, and we're going to keep dialing down these guns, because anything that forces you to beat the game too fast, where you can't play the game long enough, is going to require you to play something else. So we want to keep you in the game longer. You're not bettering my experience. My experience is less than. Now, I will admit, the breaker, I don't really see a huge difference. I was already reloading quick. But that doesn't mean that others haven't had that exact same experience or the opposite experience. The fantasy of the breaker is a powerful automatic shotgun that bucks wildly as you hose down targets in front of you. It should be deadly up close with a high DPS, and its major drawback should be ammunition. It's so funny how you tell me how the gun should work, but you didn't design the gun to work that way from the beginning, according to you. So why should I be penalized for your dumbass mistake? You see what I'm saying? This is the foolishness of these dudes, these people who work in these companies. You want to, you think you're doing better by creating an explanation for me to be like, okay, I understand. No, you idiot. The problem we have with live service games is that you don't release the game the way it should be from the jump. There should be no need for nerfs. That's the point. You release the game is as it is. The only thing you do is add to it. You don't subtract from it. So you're telling me, oh, we made a mistake. You would, bro, if people weren't using the gun that way, you would have never made any changes. But because we used it that way, oh, we want to dial it back. Just be honest, bro. Because we know what it is. It's a business. Now, the Punisher, I think they just buffed this. So I don't know if I waste time with this. Both of these. The Punisher is a powerful pump shotgun that should hit hard, but limited by its slow reload and fire rate. So you're just going to explain that it was trash and we made it better. Same thing with the breaker spray and pray. It was intended to be an even wilder, more point and destroy version of a regular breaker, something where pacing yourself would be even harder, a shotgun that requires you to get closer, but in comparison have a higher damage potential once up close. Blah, blah, blah. You increased it, /nerfed it by lowering the magazine capacity. It's better. Then the railgun, which is what people are so pissed off about. And I'm not pissed off. I used the railgun. I grinded to get to the railgun. I went to like level 20. I'm at like level 23 right now. But I grinded to get to the railgun. This will give you a perspective, right? I'm at level 23, and there's a lot of people who are level 30, 40 something. So, I mean, I don't have all the time in the world to play this game. But another one of the current meta weapons enforced by its convenience and efficiency. Wow, wouldn't you think your military would want you to be conveniently taken care of and efficient when you're on the battlefield? But where is their philosophy coming from? We don't want you to have conveniency. We don't want anything to be efficient. The railgun is really intended to be a high-powered anti-tank sniper rifle requiring both timing with the unsafe fire mode and accuracy where you hit the enemy. It was vastly overperforming in how safe it was to use and how convenient it was, not requiring a backpack or assistance to be effective and not requiring risks to take out even larger armed targets. You know, these sentences are retarded to me. They just are. We don't want you to have fun and convenience and efficiency in your play style. We want to make it more difficult so that you will lean more towards not playing. That's exactly what it's going to do. So let's take away so you lean towards not playing our game. This is so retarded to me. This is stupid. To that end, we have changed it so that the safe mode is capable of penetrating medium arm. This is where everyone wants to wig out. Bro, it's not it's just the safe mode. Again, I go back to the original question. What does the nerf really mean? It means that you creating a culture here that whatever I've given to you, I could just change my mind and quickly change it down the road. So your progression doesn't really matter anymore. Because I can, in one fell swoop, change what your progression gave you, that experience. What people don't understand is when you play a game, you're playing for the experience in addition to the gameplay. So when you take away the experience that we have, which means the way a gun shoots and the way a gun feels and the damage that it outputs, you've indirectly changed something that you can't actually measure. And then that makes me feel less than. A great example is a game like Gears of War. Gears of War 1, 2, and 3. Fantastic games. From my knowledge, never went through this crap of nerfing and buffing. None of that garbage. It's probably when Gears 4 and 5 came out when the game fell off. You didn't change how the Gnasher felt. You didn't change how the Lancer felt when you saw dudes in half. Like, they had these games released the way they were, and if anything, they just added more to them. Now, the first 2 or 3 games, I don't ever recall DLC at all. But the third one, maybe. The fourth one for sure, and the fifth one for sure. But my point, and that's why the games aren't even coming out with anything new anymore, because it kind of screwed that whole thing as well. So again, to go back to the reason why most people don't like live service games is because these guys don't release games fully finished. And then you're not adding, you're just subtracting. So you started off on the wrong foot. No one could ever play your game. Do you really think you'd reach these heights if this happened so early? Because here's what most companies would do. Most companies wouldn't fix the server issues. They would just add the nerfs, and then boom, Helldivers would have just died. Like, instantly. People couldn't play their game. Boom, they hit it with the nerfs. So they were smart enough not to do that. But man, if they keep this up, again, I could be proven wrong. I tend to think not, because they seem to be very adamant about this. And they really do believe that just by adding vehicles to do the same thing we already do on planets, just moving around, is going to make the experience fun. No, bro. We're going to have like maybe a week or 2 of that, and then it's just another vehicle, and then another vehicle. It's going to do the same thing. You're just slowly progressing us. We'll walk around the field in a tank for a week or 2, and then we'll drive around the field in a tank for a week or 2. The enemies will still just be as annoying. We'll get stuck. We'll probably realize, well, we can move faster on foot than we can with the vehicles. And then the game is over. This game doesn't look like it's going to have any legs past like 4 months, maybe. Maybe it'll last that long when you're already doing things like this. And then just imagine you add something super powerful, and then people use that instead and say, bump it, bump the railgun. I got this new tank. And now everyone's using a tank. What are you going to do? Nerf it? Because it's killing all the enemies too quickly. It's just silly. Then here's what makes the whole thing really dumb. They add so much to the flamethrower that all that's going to happen is people are just going to switch to the flamethrower. So now, when they're fighting the Terminids, you'll definitely see this. You probably won't see this much with the automatons, because those dudes are they're beefy. But all they're gonna do is everyone's just gonna switch to flamethrower. So did you really help the game by increasing the viability of other guns? No, you just took another gun that was a stratagem in the game. You made that way more powerful, and everyone's gonna use that. And then eventually, the flamethrower will get a nerf, and they'll do the exact same thing. The laser cannon got buffed, but it's still trash. I've seen it. I've used it. Sucks. Then the next one, the shield backpack. Shield backpack is safety at an expense of a backpack slot. Unfortunately, the safety offered up to the shield backpack was a bit too great. Again, I want to go back to that question. What does a nerf really mean? It just means I paid for something. I had an experience. You promised an experience, and now you've told me you can take that away from me. That's why people are so upset. And this is what you did with the shield backpack. Is it a big deal? Really, no. Is any of the changes they made that were terrible a really big deal? They really aren't. It just tells me the next time you're going to F something up, and I'm going to have an awful experience. So I could just take the cues right now and just say, well, you know what? I'm going to be out of here because this game's not really going to last. I already know where it's headed. unless they make a major change, this is what's going to happen every single time they come out with something really cool. It's always funny how companies will come out with something really cool people love, and then they're so quick to take it away less than a month later. And that's just not logical. Then again, you've created the PvP problem, which is you don't want PvP because of toxicity, but you've created PvP indirectly because now everyone on Reddit is just going to beat the brakes off of you for having a different opinion, for having a different playstyle, because I suck. I'm not as good as you. I'd like to see a lot of y'all mother truckers on Sifu. I'd love to see your stats. Show me what you did on Sifu. You didn't put in this work like I did. I made up a very small percentage of people who achieved achievements on the PlayStation. It was ridiculous. So that's my point. It's like these people talk all that stuff, but they do it behind the digital wall, and it's hilarious to me. And then it's unwarranted. If I was fighting you on Mortal Kombat and I was using the railgun and the railgun was overpowered, 100% agree with you. Cannot argue with that, because then you're like, bro, everybody's using a railgun and I just keep dying in this game when I play other players. But that's not what's happening. We're on the same freaking team. I'm helping you, you helping me. When I kill this charger, the sooner I kill this charger, the better, and we can get to the next part of the mission. But now you pissed off at your own teammates. Oh, you just using the strong guns. Yeah, so I can make our experience more enjoyable and then actually kill this thing so we can move on. It's up to them. It's up to them to make the game better. And I agree. They need to focus on the bugs. I have someone in, this is a live stream as well, but they need to focus on the bugs and the server issues before they worry about buffs and nerfs. Agreed, 100%. They're focusing on the wrong things. And I even mentioned that a little earlier, that most gaming companies, they would focus on the nerfs and then fix the issues later. They tried to change it around a little bit by fixing some of the server issues and quickly went right into the nerf shortly afterwards. This tells me, again, these are the signs of a game that's heading in the wrong direction. And I think, unfortunately, they'll keep doing things like this. And I know we gloss over a lot of this, but he says in closing here, I hope this gives you a greater insight on how we're thinking about balance and why we make the changes we have. Happy hell diving. Wow. So this is not a conversation where we can go back and forth with it. This is a one-sided way of doing things. And to me, I get the feeling that, wow, I guess I'm just glad the game was $40. I guess that's the best that I could say, is because, like I said before, this game doesn't have much to it. And I do think it was on its way out. I do think maybe the game had maybe a month left in it. But by doing this and making the game, I mean, literally, I went online and people were just quitting. There might be a lot of people online on the numbers, etc. I'm just telling you my experience. I saw a lot of people in the higher difficulties were playing the game and they just quit time and time again. And I'm not talking about one guy, two guys. I'm talking about whole squads. I would get into a whole squad, then dudes would quit and just leave. Now, there were other issues, I think, that came out with the patch that may have something to do with that. But I was seeing a consensus all around of like, bro, this is getting ridiculous. We can't do anything to these enemies, and we were just getting massacred. And I'm talking about people who were level 35, 40, 50, just quitting. So I'm concerned, and that's the reason why I made this video. I'm concerned that, man, we spoke too soon. We thought this game was going to be absolutely fantastic, and they've already put the first sign of failure into play. So, hey, if you listen to me this long, you must really agree with me if you've gotten this far. Or you're just one of those people that like to just listen to the video to find anything that's a mistake just so you can rail on me in the comments. To be honest with you, I don't really care, but I find that funny. So I welcome the hate because I know that's what you're going to bring. I appreciate you listening to me. Again, I'm the Lemesis, your nemesis, but you can always call me Lem. Like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitch. And as always, like I always say, if you don't know the Lord Jesus Christ, you should get to know him. It'll be the best decision you ever make in your life. Ask him to come into your life. And again, best decision you ever make. Peace, love, and hap. Hopefully Arrowhead listens to me and listens to the fans that are complaining. And they make these changes, and they change their philosophy, because again, it's a weak game, meaning it doesn't really have a lot of legs, and doing things like this will communicate to the player base that you're not serious about doing things long term, and that nothing is guaranteed. So that's my 2 cents to the situation. Peace, love, and hap. I'll catch you guys on the next one.